The clanging of cell doors echoed through the grimy prison hallway. Four thugs, Mick, Tony, Derek, and Shane, leaned against the wall, smirking. "Look who just waddled in," Mick jeered, his voice carrying down the hall. "Bet he smells like old socks and regrets." The new inmate, a frail man in his 70s named Samuel Carter, shuffled slowly, hands trembling, carrying a small bundle of personal items. The thugs circled him like wolves, laughter bouncing off the concrete walls. "Hey, Grandpa, you gonna need a walker to survive in here?" Tony sneered, nudging Derek, who laughed so hard he nearly fell. Shane, the tallest, crossed his arms. "Don't worry, boys. He won't last a day. Let's make sure he doesn't." Samuel didn't respond. He lowered his eyes, muttering softly to himself, keeping a quiet, steady pace. Yet, there was a strange calm in his movements, a subtle grace that seemed out of place. The tension in the hall thickened. Other inmates peeked from their cells, sensing the impending confrontation. The four bullies exchanged confident glances. They were certain this was going to be a show of power, a weak old man, an easy target. But Samuel Carter's silence hid a story they had no idea existed. The prison cafeteria buzzed with the usual tension, clattering trays, murmured threats, and the occasional shouted insult. Samuel Carter sat alone at the far end, slowly eating his meager portion of gruel. His hands, though trembling, moved with careful precision. Mick, Tony, Derek, and Shane spotted him immediately, striding over with grins that spelled trouble. "Hey, look, it's snack time for Grandpa," Derek shouted, snatching Samuel's tray and tossing it onto the floor. The room went silent for a heartbeat. Samuel's eyes lifted, calm and unshaken. "Please, just let me eat," he said softly, almost whispering, yet his voice carried enough authority to make a few inmates glance nervously away. Shane laughed and leaned down, smacking the old man's shoulder. "Eat off the floor if you're lucky, old-timer." Mick joined in, throwing a punch that missed by inches, only grazing the sleeve of Samuel's jumpsuit. Other inmates began to murmur, sensing something different about Samuel. He didn't flinch, didn't cry out, didn't fight. He simply rose, slow and deliberate, as if measuring each movement. The four thugs laughed, thinking their intimidation worked. But there was an unspoken tension now, a subtle awareness spreading through the room. This old man might not be as weak as he looked. The next morning, the yard was packed with inmates under the sharp gaze of guards. Samuel walked slowly, cane in hand, keeping to himself. But the four bullies were already waiting near the basketball court, smirks plastered across their faces. "Morning, Grandpa," Tony sneered, stepping forward. "You ready to get schooled?" Derek shoved Samuel lightly, testing his reaction. The old man barely moved, only tilting his head and exhaling calmly. Shane scoffed, throwing a rock that clattered harmlessly at Samuel's feet. "Come on, you ancient relic. Fight back or admit you're weak." Mick laughed, circling him like a predator. Samuel didn't flinch. Instead, he shifted his weight subtly, eyes focused and steady. The other inmates watched in silence, sensing something they couldn't quite explain. Then, with a movement almost too quick to follow, Samuel stepped aside, and Derek stumbled past him, arms flailing. A precise, gentle push from Samuel's cane, not harsh, but perfectly aimed, sent Derek sprawling onto the ground. Silence fell across the yard. The four bullies stared in disbelief. "What, how?" Shane stammered, stepping back. Mick's confident grin faltered. No one had expected such control, such precision, from a man who looked frail and beaten down. Samuel's calm gaze met theirs, and for the first time, the thugs sensed that they were dealing with someone far more dangerous than they could imagine. By mid-afternoon, tension in the prison had reached a boiling point. Mick, Tony, Derek, and Shane huddled near the gym, plotting their next move. "That old man, he embarrassed us," Mick growled, fists clenched. "We can't let him get away with it." Tony spat on the ground. "We hit him together this time. No mistakes." Derek nodded, rubbing his sore arm from the morning's mishap. Shane cracked his knuckles, a cruel grin forming. He won't even see it coming. Meanwhile, Samuel sat quietly in the corner of the library, reading a tattered martial arts manual. He barely glanced up, but a subtle tightening of his jaw showed he knew exactly what was coming. The four bullies stormed toward him, shoving aside other inmates without warning. "Enough hiding, old man," Mick yelled, swinging a fist toward Samuel. But the moment Samuel moved, time seemed to slow for the onlookers. With a series of precise, fluid motions, Samuel redirected Mick's punch, guiding his momentum harmlessly into the wall. Tony lunged, Derek followed, Shane swinging wildly, but each strike met nothing but air or a controlled counter. The bullies froze, stunned and off balance. Laughter turned into panic as the realization hit. This wasn't an ordinary old man. They were facing a master. The yard had gone silent. Other inmates stopped to watch, eyes wide, as Samuel Carter stood unmoved, his movements deliberate and controlled. The four bullies, Mick, Tony, Derek, and Shane, were breathing heavily, trying to recover from the earlier failed attacks. You can't be serious, Derek stammered, rubbing his ribs where Samuel had subtly shifted his weight to redirect the blow. Tony took a cautious step back, glaring. He's just old. Samuel didn't reply. He simply shifted his stance, a quiet calm radiating from him that unnerved everyone nearby. There was no rage, no desperation, only focus. Other inmates whispered among themselves, sensing the presence of someone extraordinary. Shane, unable to hide his fear, muttered, "He's not just strong. There's something about him." Mick, pride wounded, clenched his fists. "We'll see about that," he growled, signaling the others to attack together. Samuel's eyes followed them, steady and unshaken. For a moment, it seemed like he was merely observing, letting the bullies think they had control. But inside, decades of training as a kung fu master were ready, honed by years of discipline, patience, and wisdom. The four thugs had no idea they were about to face a storm disguised as an old man. The four bullies lunged together, thinking sheer force could finally overpower Samuel. Mick swung wildly, Tony aimed a punch, Derek kicked, and Shane barreled forward. But Samuel moved with a grace that belied his age. Each motion was precise, flowing like water, turning their attacks against them. Mick crashed into the wall, his momentum perfectly redirected. Tony found himself gently but firmly guided to the ground, unable to resist Samuel's control. Derek's kick missed entirely, leaving him unbalanced, and Shane stumbled, arms flailing, helpless. The yard fell silent as other inmates watched in awe. Samuel's movements were not reckless. Every strike, every block, every push was calculated, controlled, and humane. He wasn't trying to hurt them, just to show them that brute force had no place here. His eyes remained calm, almost compassionate, even as the bullies scrambled to regain their footing. Finally, the four thugs sat on the ground, panting, bruised, and humiliated. Their confidence was shattered. Samuel, still composed, adjusted his stance and took a slow step forward. "I am not here to fight," he said quietly, voice steady. "But I will not allow disrespect or cruelty." The weight of his words hung in the air, leaving the bullies speechless. The prison yard remained still, the echoes of the confrontation fading. Other inmates, who had watched from the edges, began to murmur, exchanging amazed glances. Samuel Carter, the frail-looking old man, had turned the tide without a single cruel blow, his movements precise and calm. A younger inmate named Marcus approached cautiously. "Sir, that was incredible," he whispered, eyes wide. "I've never seen anyone move like that before." Samuel offered a small, gentle nod. "It's not about violence," he said softly. "It's about control, respect, and knowing your own limits." The four bullies still sat on the ground, shoulders slumped, pride shattered. Mick muttered under his breath, We messed up." Tony, finally regaining some composure, looked at Samuel with something close to fear and awe. Derek and Shane exchanged guilty glances, suddenly aware that they had underestimated the man they had mocked. Slowly, whispers of admiration spread through the yard. Samuel didn't seek it, but respect found him anyway. Other inmates who had once dismissed him began to nod politely, even stepping aside when he passed. For the first time in weeks, there was a sense of calm, of order, and of quiet admiration in the yard. Samuel's presence had shifted the energy. He had reminded everyone that age and wisdom were powerful in their own right. The following days, Samuel's presence in the prison yard became something of a quiet legend. Inmates who once ignored him now sought his advice, and even the guards noticed the change in the yard's energy. Samuel began offering small lessons, not just in movement, but in discipline, focus, and respect. Marcus, the young inmate who had approached him earlier, became his eager student. "Teach me, sir. I want to be better," Marcus said, eyes shining with determination. Samuel smiled softly. "Strength isn't just physical. It's patience, control, and knowing yourself. Kung Fu is more than fighting. It's living with honor." Even the four bullies watched from afar, their resentment slowly giving way to curiosity. Mick muttered, "He's actually teaching them." Tony shook his head, conflicted. "I can't believe I thought he was weak." Samuel led small groups through exercises in balance and coordination, showing that even subtle movements could cultivate power and confidence. The yard, once chaotic and tense, now hummed with a sense of purpose. Inmates helped each other, laughed, and learned to respect boundaries, all under Samuel's quiet guidance. For the first time, the prison felt less like a cage and more like a place where growth, even for hardened men, was possible. Samuel's wisdom began leaving an imprint that no brute force could erase. Weeks later, the prison yard buzzed with anticipation. Word had spread that Samuel Carter's influence was reshaping the atmosphere, and not everyone welcomed it. The four bullies, Mick, Tony, Derek, and Shane, had spent days nursing bruised pride, planning one final attempt to assert dominance. "You think you can teach us respect?" Mick spat, circling Samuel in the yard. "We're done playing nice." Shane cracked his knuckles, Derek and Tony flanking him, each with tense, aggressive stances. Samuel remained calm, arms folded, eyes steady. "I do not seek conflict," he said quietly, "but I will not allow harm to those who wish to learn, or to those who cannot defend themselves." The bullies lunged, faster and more coordinated than before, thinking the odds were finally in their favor. But Samuel's years of kung fu mastery came alive, fluid, precise, and unstoppable. Every attack was deflected, every push redirected, every strike neutralized without cruelty. The four bullies collided with each other, tumbling helplessly onto the ground, gasping for air. Other inmates watched in awe, realizing the full extent of Samuel's skill and wisdom. He stood over the defeated bullies, calm, unshaken, a silent testament to discipline, patience, and honor. By the end of the yard confrontation, it was clear Samuel had not just defended himself, he had transformed the very heart of the prison. The prison yard had never felt so alive with respect. The four bullies, Mick, Tony, Derek, and Shane, sat quietly, humbled and thoughtful, no longer brash or aggressive. Samuel Carter walked among the inmates, offering guidance, a quiet smile, and the calm authority of a man who had lived a lifetime mastering both body and mind. Marcus approached, eyes shining. "Sir, thank you for showing me there's more to strength than just fists." Samuel placed a hand on his shoulder. "Remember, Marcus, courage isn't fighting everyone. It's knowing when to act and when to hold back." The once chaotic yard had become a place of learning, discipline, and unexpected camaraderie. Other inmates now assisted each other, practiced small kung fu techniques under Samuel's guidance, and treated the older men with newfound respect. Even guards noticed the shift, nodding quietly at the peaceful energy. The four bullies, now reflective, approached Samuel together. Mick spoke first, voice low. We were wrong. Thank you for teaching us something real." Samuel nodded, eyes twinkling with gentle wisdom. As the sun set over the prison walls, Samuel Carter stood tall, not as a fighter, but as a mentor, a protector, and a living example of honor, discipline, and compassion. His presence had transformed not just a yard, but hearts, leaving a legacy that would endure long after his time.